Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world. And so much love to each and every one of you. Big hugs to everybody, and go and get yourself something lovely to drink, because this is a very exciting story that will have you on the edge of your seat. Because of course we know very well that Shelley has met up with Max McKeith. She thinks she's met up with the most wonderful man. But she doesn't know that Max McKeith has a horrendous past, because he actually murdered a very innocent young woman at a camping site, and now he's taking his fiancée to this very same camping site. So let's find out what happens next. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, click the notification bell and the thumbs up, and let's get started with part 4 of our story tonight. Shelley rarely loved the Lakefield camping ground, for it had exceeded her greatest expectations. She couldn't believe it was so empty. There were no other campers around, but Max had assured her that was always the case in early spring, and he reckoned it was his favourite time of the year to go, even though it got profoundly chilly at night. "I don't think people like to book the campground so soon after winter, you know. I suspect they're rather worried the nights will be too cold for them. But in my book this is the best time of the year to come to the camping ground, as you have the entire place to yourself. Granted, the nights can be chilly here, but provided you wrap up warm, it really isn't a big deal. Besides, the campground offers you as many blankets as you like." Shelley couldn't remember a time that she'd felt more happy. She glanced down proudly at the sapphire and diamond ring on her finger, and then over at the exquisite beautiful lake that was glistening in the noonday sun, reflecting on its shimmery surface all the trees that were bowing over the water's edge. In the furthest distance, she observed the imposing silhouette of Mount Rainier, resplendently enrobed in a carpet of white snow, like a magnificent ice queen. She thought in that second how incredibly lucky she was to be here, with the most wonderful man in the entire world, who would soon become her husband. Why had she been such a doubting Thomas in the reality of true love? What a stroke of luck that she had serendipitously run into Max at the doggy park. When she had told her sister the story, Eloise had shrieked with absolute delight, saying that it was all so incredibly romantic. The only niggling thought that had sabotaged a little bit of Shelley's joy was her grandmother's ominous words. "I'm just saying, love, just be careful, that's all." They seemed to hang around in her head, rather like a misplaced Christmas decoration that doesn't belong on a tree. She glanced up at her magnificent fiancé, who flashed her a beautiful smile, and came over to wrap his arms lovingly around her, enveloping her in a warm hug. "So what do you think about this place?" he asked her, his green eyes meeting hers. "It's magnificent," were the only words that Shelley could utter. "I don't think I've ever camped in a more idyllic place. The day has been so wonderful, hasn't it?" The couple had thoroughly enjoyed rowing across the lake with a rowing boat that they had found in the boathouse. Max had done a spot of fishing on the fishing pier and caught a couple of reasonable-sized trout, along with another strange-looking fish that they both decided to throw back into the water, as Shelley wasn't sure what the fish was, and she didn't fancy eating an unnamed fish. Shelley and Max had sashayed happily hand in hand across the alpine field, bespeckled with the most dazzling, glorious wildflowers, the likes of such Shelley had never seen before, that were industriously being pollinated by bees and all kinds of glorious butterflies of every available colour. Max had picked up some wild flowers for his fiancée and put a couple in her hair, and told her adoringly how pretty she looked, and in that moment Shelley felt deliriously happy. "I'm so lucky to have you, Max," she said. "I really mean it. I'm lucky to have met you." Max had lifted up her delicate chin to his face and said, "No, I'm the lucky one. There are some things about me, if you knew, Shelley, well, you'd probably run a mile." Shelley had looked at Max, her heart bursting with love for him. "There's nothing you could ever say, Max, about yourself that would make me love you less." And when she said that, she had meant every word of it. "You mean that?" said Max, his face lighting up as he drew her into another warm hug. "Of course I mean it. I love you, Max." Shelley had said. That evening Max got to work, preparing a fire pit. He began cooking the 2 trout they had caught earlier on in the day, along with a spatchcock chicken and some lamb kebabs over the flames. And the aromatic smells of the sizzling meat made Shelley extremely hungry. The 2 of them sat together side by side, tucking into big wedges of garlic bread dripping with butter, and meat that was so tender it was falling off the bone. And as for the fresh fish that they had caught, Shelley had never tasted fish so good. It had been a sensory experience in every sense of the word. Shelley licked the sticky juices off her fingers and contentedly stared at the crackling flames of the fire pit that had almost locked her into a soulful trance. She couldn't remember a time when she felt this happy or content. "I love it out here," she said wistfully, glancing up at the sky that was now covered in stars. "I've never seen anything so spectacular before. The Milky Way is reflected on the water. Oh, I know I keep going on. I keep sounding like a broken record, don't I? But I'm so glad I found you, Max. Honestly, I really am. If we hadn't met, my life, well, it would be so tediously dull, let me tell you. I would still be living with my grandparents and working at the gallery. I'm still working at the gallery, but now I've moved in with you. I always said that love stories belonged in fiction books, but now I know true love is definitely real. You've made a believer out of me, Max. Growing up, my sister Eloise would read love stories all the time. She particularly loved historical fiction, and one of her favourite books was Jane Eyre. I'd tell her that her romantic aspirations bore no resemblance to real life. I was such a big cynic back then, all about love, of course, until I found you, Max. And so now Eloise is telling me I told you so. She's been mercilessly teasing me for being such a doubter. I know we haven't been together for very long, Max. But when you know, you know.
Never a truer word was ever spoken, said Max. When Heathcliff came bolting towards your grandmother's Maltese poodle Sophie, whom you thought was about to be devoured, when I saw you for the very first time looking so flustered, I was blown away by you. In that second I thought she's the one for me, and it turns out I was right about that.
Shelley giggled. You thought that when you saw me? You never said.
Well, there's some things you don't say when you just meet someone, do you? If I'd told you how I felt there and then, I'd have scared you away.
Not a chance. Never, said Shelley, shaking her head. You could never scare me away, Max. Never. Max looked at Shelley soberly, and then a very serious expression seemed to develop on his face. Then he said rather gingerly, You know when you were saying earlier that there was nothing I could have done in my past that would make you love me less? Did you really mean that, Shelley? I mean, really, really mean it? But of course I meant every word of it, said Shelley. I've done some stupid things in my past that I deeply, deeply regret, like the way I teased my sister so incessantly. Who hasn't? And I'm sure you have too. But those things are behind us now. We have the future to look forward to, don't we? I'm sure anything you may have done, Shelley, was not as bad as what I've done. I bet you've never killed a person before, have you? Shelley's eyes widened. Her blood ran cold. She let out a self-soothing chuckle, not knowing what to do. Had she heard her fiancé right? Was he implying that he'd actually killed a person? Of course he wasn't. Why, the very idea was absolutely ludicrous. Max was teasing her, that's what this was, to see how she'd react. Of course I haven't killed anyone, Max. Have you? She joked, trying to make light of the conversation that was becoming increasingly heavy. There was a dark, faraway look in Max's eyes that suddenly scared her. Did her fiancé have a dark secret, she wondered? Had he actually killed someone? Please, God, no. Don't laugh, Shelley. I'm being deadly serious, said Max. We're getting married, are we not? And I, for one, don't want there to be any secrets between the two of us. Don't you agree? I mean, when you marry, you become one flesh, do you not? What exactly are you saying, Max? Asked Shelley, her heart beginning to twist in a tangle of knots. while nausea began to rise up in the back of her throat, so she was beginning to taste the spatchcock chicken she had eaten earlier. "Are you saying what I think you're saying? Have you killed someone, Max?"
"I have,"
said Max, very matter-of-factly. As he said this, he took a great big gulp of Mountain Dew and made a rather unfortunate burp. "What, a hit and run or something?" asked Shelley. "You knocked someone over in the road, is that what you did? You were young at the time. You fled from the scene. I've heard of stories like that, and I can understand, why it happens, because people get frightened. I could forgive something like that. I mean, you should have come forward, of course, and admitted what you'd done. But I guess you were just very young at the time. It's understandable, isn't it? I mean, it was an accident. The main thing was it was an accident."
"It wasn't an accident, Shelley. I need you to understand I killed someone. But I didn't mean it. I was drunk. My temper when I'm drunk, it gets inflamed. That's why I don't drink anymore. That's why I'm teetotal. You've often asked me why I don't drink alcohol. Now you know the reason. I don't like what I become when I drink alcohol. It's like there's a demon inside me, and I lose complete control over myself. But when I'm stone-cold sober, and I look back at my behaviour, I don't recognise myself at all. That's what happened in this case. I lost my temper, and things went too far. I got carried away. I was in a dark place emotionally at the time. My ex-girlfriend Nicola had dumped me out of the blue. So I was miserable, and I guess I just snapped when another pretty woman rejected me as well. Things just got on top of me, and I overreacted."
"Who did you kill?" asked Shelley, her ears now burning, for she couldn't believe what Max had just confessed to. The man of her dreams was not so dreamy after all.
"Her name was Babs. It happened 7 years ago, at this very same campground, I'm afraid to say."
Shelley's face drained of all colour. It went a ghostly white. "You mean you brought me to the very same camping ground where you killed this woman? But why did you kill her, Max? Why? Help me to understand." Max shrugged his shoulders. For a moment he looked like a small boy. His green eyes seemed to smoulder with a deep regret, as if he wished he could go back in time and undo the damage he had so obviously done.
"As I was saying, I was at rock bottom in my life at the time. I need you to believe me on this, Shelley. I had been in a relationship, a very loving relationship with a woman I adored. And then one day she broke up with me, without any explanation whatsoever. I was heartbroken, absolutely devastated. We were supposed to come to this campground for a weekend together in early spring. I was going to propose to her when we got here, but she broke up with me before I ever got the chance to pop the question. I really did think she was the one. I was very upset because this ex-girlfriend of mine, Nicola was her name, gave me no reason at all, why she'd ended things with me so abruptly, and that really sucked. I had been coming to this campground for many years with my parents when I was a little boy. I then decided that rather than drowning my sorrows at home and feeling all sorry for myself, I should come out to this campground on my own without my girlfriend, which is what I did. I was expecting to be the only camper here, but I was surprised to see someone had pitched a tent by the lake. There was no sign of a car around on the campground, which I found rather odd. I approached the tent, expecting it to be empty. I asked if anyone was around, and that was when I met Babs for the first time. Her real name was Barbara, but everyone called her Babs.
So you didn't even know this girl you killed? How the hell did this happen? Said Shelley, her whole body shuddering in horror to hear her fiancé talking so candidly about such a heinous, devastating event.
Well, I'd set up a fire pit like I have done tonight, and I was cooking a lot of food, and spatchcock chicken was on the menu as well. I encouraged Babs to join me for a meal. She was an attractive young lady, who was also from Seattle. We had a lot in common. Turned out she went to the same university that Nicola did, although she was a year behind Nicola, actually. She was younger than me. We got talking, and I guess I got a little fresh with her. I had been jilted by my ex, and I guess I was hoping this woman would find me attractive, and that we could, have a romantic time together. So I could put Nicola behind me once and for all. But no such luck.
What do you mean you got a little fresh with her? Asked Shelley. Be more specific, will you, Max?
Well, I tried to kiss her. She pushed me away. I can't remember the order of things, or what happened exactly. It was a long time ago, 7 years ago to be precise. My mind's a little blank. I was drunk at the time. I had drunk a ton of beers. But when she rejected me, it got too much for me to handle. I got mad, because my ex-girlfriend had rejected me as well. And now I felt fired up with indignance. I wanted to get my revenge on Nicola and this woman at the same time. I picked up my hunting rifle and began firing at the lake. And then one thing led to another. And for some reason I ended up chasing Babs into the woods. She was absolutely terrified because I told her I was going to kill her. And I meant every word of it. That's how angry I was. I may have been drunk, but I held my own and went after her. I was filled with an insatiable anger. Oh, I cannot tell you how furious I was. I just wanted to kill her.
Oh my God, Max! You killed her! How did it happen? Please, God, tell me this isn't true. I can't believe what you're telling me.
I'm sorry, babe. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. But it is true. I'm not happy with what I did back then. I've regretted it for many years. I gave her chase, following her into the woods with my rifle and my bright torch, and then finally I succeeded in catching up with her. She was hiding under a bramble bush, would you believe? The only reason I discovered she was there was I saw a piece of her shirt caught up on a thorny briar. So I looked under the bush, and there she was. I could hardly believe it. I would never have looked for her under that bush if she hadn't ripped off a piece of that shirt. It proved to be her undoing. She was shaking and trembling like a leaf. She was terrified of me. It was so easy after that. Far too easy. It was like yanking a trapped animal out of a cage. She was helpless. I remember dragging her by the legs. She was kicking and screaming and begging for her life. And then I pulled the trigger and blew her brains out. And in that moment I was very happy that she was a goner. I thought that she got what she deserved, because she'd rejected me. I wasn't thinking right at the time. As I keep telling you, not that I'm making excuses for myself, of course, but I was in a bad place emotionally. As I keep saying, it's hard to explain. Something almost takes over me, and I can't stop myself from doing what I do. The next morning, of course, after I sobered up, I realized what I'd done and the gravity of what I'd done. So I had to get rid of her body, didn't I? I weighted her body down with stones that I found lying around the place, and then I threw her into the lake. Then I got the hell out of there as fast as I could, making sure there was no evidence of my presence on the campground. I picked up every shell casing I could find from my rifle and got the hell out of there. I told the owner of the campground, a man called Chris Wilton, that I'd never been able to go to the campground, and he believed me. So that was that. I can read you a newspaper article if you like, said Max, ferreting in his wallet to bring out a crumpled piece of newspaper that looked like it had been read 100 times over. The police remain mystified as to the disappearance of a young 22-year-old woman called Barbara Roxburgh, known to her friends as Babs, who went missing at the Lakefield camping ground in Mount Rainier on Saturday last, where her tent remained pitched, but her whereabouts could not be located. The police searched the entire area thoroughly and were unable to find the missing woman. A cadaver dog was brought onto the scene and went running straight through the woods, sitting down at a trail close to a bush of brambles, where he began to make a whining sound. The dog's handler said the dog was telling him he could smell a deceased corpse, and that he believed, based on his dog's behaviour, that Barbara Roxburgh was no longer in life, but her body was obviously never recovered, so it must have been moved away. Yet the same dog seemed to show an interest in the lake, and the dog handler believed the body might be in the water,
A diver searched the lake thoroughly and couldn't find any sign of a body. But then again the lake was full of vegetation, and he claimed it was difficult to see clearly. Veronica Wilton, who was Barbara Roxburgh's very best friend, had invited her to stay at her uncle's private camping ground, with its magnificent prepossessing views over Mount Rainier. She described her best friend as being in a very dark place, due to a recent break-up with her ex-boyfriend Russell Bridges, who had ended their relationship as he had discovered he had stage 4 colon cancer and had been diagnosed with only 6 months left to live. He had broken up with Babs because he didn't want to put her through the hell of watching him fade away, so he thought telling her that he was no longer in love with her would help her to move forward with her life. "She was a broken woman," Veronica told our reporter. "I've never seen her so broken before. I thought if I brought her to the camping ground, it would help get her mind off Russell. At the time I had no way of knowing that Russell was suffering from end-stage cancer, and I wish he had told Babs about this, for she could have supported him during this grievous time, and then none of this would ever have happened. Babs would probably still be with us now. I should never have left Babs at the camping ground all on her own. My mother had had a nasty fall in Seattle, so I wanted to see if she was all right. I drove all the way to Seattle with the intention of coming back as soon as I could, to continue with our camping adventure, which we thought we might extend for a couple of days or so. Babs wanted to remain on the campground, and given there were no other campers apart from a young couple who failed to show up, I was sure Babs would be fine. I was detained at the hospital longer than I envisaged, but I returned to the camping ground to continue with our holiday break, and Babs had disappeared off the face of the earth. I searched for her high and low, becoming increasingly frantic, and then I'm afraid I was forced to call the police, who did a thorough search of the campground and found no sign of her anywhere. When asked if she thought her friend might be suicidal, Veronica said that she really didn't believe that Babs would take her own life. But then again, she told the paper, you don't really know what goes on in a person's head, do you? The investigation remains ongoing, but it would seem that Barbara Roxburgh's disappearance has left the police completely stumped. As to what became of her, Shelley was listening to her fiancé reading the article. She had barely moved an inch. He tucked the piece of paper away in his wallet. She didn't know how to react to what he'd told her. She could have forgiven her fiancé many things, but this she couldn't forgive. "You killed her," she said to Max again. "I don't care if you were drunk, Max, you killed her. You did a horrendous thing. What you did, I can't believe it, Max. I'm in shock. This isn't the person I know."
"But you said it didn't matter what I'd done, that you would still love me."
"This is different, Max. You know it."
"I told you I was in a bad place. How many times have I got to tell you that?" said Max, snapping. "I was drunk. Things got out of hand, way too out of hand. I lost it in a moment of unbridled rage. Can't you understand that?"
"I don't care about any of that. It doesn't change a thing. Furthermore, when you were sober the following morning, you threw her body in the lake and covered your tracks, so no one would know you'd been at the camping ground. You did it intentionally. It was calculating. That poor woman's parents. Have you even thought about them? They've probably been grieving her loss for years, wondering what became of their little girl. What about that friend of hers? She probably feels so guilty for abandoning her at the camping ground, and lives with this guilt. Do you have any idea what those people must have been through? Why didn't the diver not find her body in the lake? I don't understand that."
"God only knows. Maybe he didn't search well enough, but there was a great deal of vegetation and rocks in the water, so it's not always easy to find a deceased corpse. And the report says as much, if I remember right. Why are you looking at me like this, Shelley? As if you don't know me any more. You do know me. I'm still the same man you met at the doggy park. I messed up, that's all. I've taken responsibility for what I did, even though I still get nightmares. But the good news is, I don't drink alcohol anymore."
"You haven't taken responsibility, Max. Far from it, in fact. If you had taken responsibility, you'd have admitted to what you'd done. You'd have gone straight to the police and confessed to the crime. Instead, you kept quiet and did not do a thing. It's disgusting, that's what it is.
What, you think I should have confessed my crime to the police, is that it? And been charged for murder, spending the rest of my life behind bars? Is that what you think I deserve?
Yes, that's what you do deserve, Max, because of what you did. I'd never have believed you were capable of any of this. I'm sorry, but I think we should pack up and leave right now. What you've told me is huge. I've got to think about everything you've told me long and hard, Max, said Shelley. Look, I believe you really do regret what you did, but it doesn't make any of this right. I need to think about what you've told me and see where we go to from here, Max. You need to take me home right now. I need to think about what you've told me.
What is there to think about, Shelley? You love me. I love you. I shared a big secret with you, and you promised me faithfully you would love me regardless of what I've done. All right, I admit I'm not proud of what I did. Can we please move on from here? Surely you wouldn't want me to rot away in a prison cell for the rest of my life. I made one mistake. Yes, I regret it. But I can't undo the mistake. You claimed you would forgive me if I ran over someone in the road by mistake and fled from the scene. There is no difference. I drank too much. I told you. I overreacted.
It is hugely different, Max, and you know it. I did not think the man I loved was capable of doing a thing like this. What you've told me changes everything. Absolutely everything.
But you said it didn't matter what I'd done, that you would love me regardless.
I told you I need to think about things, Max. Before Shelley could say another word, Max began to shake her vigorously, and it really started to hurt her.
You can't leave me, Shelley. You can't. I love you.
Get your hands off me, Max, said Shelley, pushing him away hard. Do you want to hurt me like you hurt Barbara Roxburgh? Is that it?
Of course not. You're not going to tell the police what I did, are you?
Asked Max, his eyes widening in horror, and then a coldness swept over his face, and his eyes went insidiously dark. And in that moment Babs absolutely knew that she would not get away from this campground alive. Was history about to repeat itself all over again? Was her body going to be flung into a lake like Babs Roxburgh's body had been 7 years earlier? Shelley's grandmother's words echoed in her mind.
All I'm saying, love, is just be careful, will you?
Get off me, Max. Let's talk about this, shall we? Said Shelley, rising to her feet. Let's talk about this.
There's nothing to talk about, is there? Said Max. You've made your feelings perfectly clear, Shelley. I thought you and I were together for keeps, and that I could share my deepest, darkest secrets with you. But it seems you're not as faithful or as devotedly loyal as I thought you were. I thought I could trust you, but now I see I was delusional. I overestimated your faithfulness in me. You're a bitch, like every other woman I've ever met. You're no different. And I'm sorry, Shelley, but you're not going to get out of here alive. Go on, run! Run into the woods! I encourage you to do so. Take a torch if you like. There's one over there next to the camping chair. I'll keep our cell phones, he said, holding up 2 cell phones in his hands. We wouldn't want you getting any naughty ideas about calling your brother Morris for help. Fat lot of good that will do you. I'll be very generous. I'll give you a 5-minute head start. Can't say fairer than that. And when I catch up with you, I will wring your neck like a chicken, and then throw you in the lake like I did with Barbara Roxburgh. I may not have a hunting rifle at my disposal, but there are many other ways you can skin a cat.
You won't get away with this, Max. There's no way you will. My grandmother's a shrewd woman. She doesn't trust you an inch. She told me to be careful. If I don't return to Seattle from this campground, the police will be all over you like a hive of bees. The best thing is to give yourself up, Max, and admit what you've done. You know it's the right thing to do, Max. Please don't do anything stupid that you're going to regret. You've ended one woman's life, and now you want to take mine as well.
5 minutes, said Max. I'm giving you 5 minutes. A 5-minute head start. Now run, or you're already dead. The choice is yours.
Babs could see by the dark, murderous look in Max's eyes that he seriously meant business. He was definitely going to kill her, like he'd killed Barbara Roxburgh 7 years earlier. Why had she not pretended that the fact that he had murdered someone was not a big deal, and that yes, she would keep his secret? And when she'd got home safely, she could have gone straight to the police and reported the murder to them. But Shelley wore her heart on her sleeve, and found it difficult to hide the disgust that was written all over her face, that Max had seen so clearly. Now that Max knew that she would obviously betray his trust, her life was in serious jeopardy, and it hung in the balance, for he would not let her leave this campground, knowing what she intended to do. The day had started so magnificently, but in a second, the man that she believed she'd loved more than life itself had become a monster to her. It was clear that even without alcohol in his system to bring out the worst in Max, this was a man that was capable of a great evil, even when he was sober, and he'd stop at nothing to protect his insidious dark secret, even if it meant killing the woman only moments before he professed to love. Max was beginning to count out loud.
1, 2, 3.
Shelley felt she'd been flung onto a scene of the Hunger Games, and so she did all she knew to do, and that was to run through the woods with a torch in her hands that Max had given her. Why hadn't he just throttled her then and there, and been done with it? Why was he giving her a 5-minute head start? The man was seriously sick in the head. He was deranged. It was almost as if he was getting some kind of twisted pleasure in giving her chase. Yet he claimed to love her, but his love was not a genuine love. That was plain to see. How could she have been so easily fooled and duped by a man that her grandmother had seen through, like a sheer translucent pane of glass? Babs would have loved to have jumped into Max's white SUV and driven away as fast as she could from the campground, but she didn't even know the code for leaving the campground, and furthermore she knew her car keys were on his person, so she began to scuttle away as fast as she could towards the tall lofty trees to take cover. The night had been so prepossessingly beautiful, with its velvety blackness glamorizing the silvery stars in the sky, but now its tenebrific veil seemed menacing and inauspicious. Even the trees shook their manes of evergreen needles under a light breeze, and they too appeared to be conspiring against her. For suddenly Shelley felt remarkably vulnerable and desperately afraid. "Oh, please, God! Please, God! Help me! Don't let him kill me!" she cried out. Then she heard Max's booming voice in the distance shouting out,
"I'm coming to get you, Shelley. Sorry, time's run out."
Shelley's heart thundered violently in her chest. What should she do, she wondered. There was no point in hiding. She knew that Max would easily find her. Running would almost certainly be a fool's errand. And to what end? Where would she run to? It was all pointless. Barbara Roxburgh's sorry story confirmed all this. Oh, what was she going to do? She couldn't run aimlessly through the woods at the dead of night like this. She'd only served to succeed in exacerbating her exhaustion, leaving herself a sitting duck for a very strong man like Max. The only thing she could do was to defend herself, but first she needed to take cover and hide. She found for herself a huge branch that she would use to whack the living daylights out of Max. If she had to kill him, then so be it. It was self-defense as far as she was concerned, but it would be so much better to just knock him out cold. If she succeeded in her endeavours, she'd be able to get a head start on him, retrieve the keys from his pocket, find the code number for the gates of the camping ground, and get the hell out of there. A blistered plan began to develop in Shelley's head. Grandpa Bobby had always told her that to succeed in war, you always needed a clever plan, and the element of surprise was crucial in wartime situations, and was a powerful tool, giving you a great advantage over your enemy. Shelley was no match for Max, that was for sure, but if she was clever and astute enough and crept up behind him surreptitiously and delivered a huge blow to the back of his head, then he wouldn't even know what had hit him. But if she did this, she had to be quick about it and very quiet at the same time. Could she actually do it? She wasn't exactly sure. She doubted that she had the courage or skill to embark upon such a challenge, but she didn't have the advantage of choice. Shelley found a stout branch, a hefty one at that, the size of a baseball bat, that would be capable of delivering a deadly blow. So she went to hide surreptitiously behind a tree, clutching the branch so tightly that the knuckles in her hands became incredibly white. She waited for Max to make his presence known. Shelley was sure Max would be expecting her to run so fast, like Barbara Roxburgh had done, but no, she was waiting for him, so that like a silent predator in the darkness she would pounce on him, and when he least expected it, he'd be attacked. She needed to outwit him in some way. Shelley was glad of the darkness, for the ambiguous shadows that danced around the grove did their quintessential part in hiding her presence. But if Max was astute and diligent enough, he'd surely see her, and if he did, she would almost certainly have all her hope expunged. She was concerned, however, that the booming sound of her heart would be so loud that Max would pick it up. Shelley took refuge behind a tree, occasionally peeking behind the substantial-sized tree trunk to fix her gaze upon the trail. Her only thought was, "Is he coming? Is he coming?" She wanted to get this over and done with as fast as she could, as her knees were barely capable of supporting her and were wobbling beneath her like an unsteady table, and with every second her courage was beginning to wane. All of a sudden she got the profound sense that she was not alone, that something or someone was watching her. She flashed her torchlight around the trees, but saw nothing. She was losing it, she thought. She needed to quieten down her imagination, which did not serve her best interests right now. She needed to focus attentively on every single passing second, not allowing any wayward thoughts to muddy the waters of her concentration. A shiver of dread ran down her spine like an electric spasm, and every hair on the back of her neck stood up on end. Shelley didn't move. She didn't dare to. She stood as still as an ice statue at a luxury banquet, even though it was cool in the grove, with a light, cool wind whipping through the trees. It would seem the heat of her own perspiration had broken out on her face, and sweat was pouring down her back. Everything in the woods went mute, as the crickets and frogs switched off their tuneful chorus almost immediately, as if they too had sensed that the ambience of the woodgrove had shifted quite significantly to something infinitely more menacing. Then she heard the dreadful sound of Max's boots pulverizing the forest floor as he crunched twigs and fallen leaves and needles under his feet like a hefty pestle. He was cursing under his breath, and she heard him saying, "Bloody bitch! Bloody bitch! I'm going to wring her neck like a chicken. How could I have got her so wrong? She's no different to the other bitches I've dated. They were all the bloody same. So damn ungrateful, so incredibly selfish." Max's bright torchlight pierced blindingly through the trees, and Shelley was terribly afraid her cover would be blown. But he had not seen her, and as he walked past her, she crept cautiously behind him, with her tree branch in her hand, and was about to deliver him a massive blow to the back of his head, when Max promptly turned around, and a malevolent grin cast itself upon his face. "You made it so easy for me. Easier than I imagined, didn't you, Shelley?" he said, lunging towards her and grabbing her arm, and he pulled the branch out of her clutches, so she couldn't even use it against him, for it just dropped out of her hands. "You underestimated me, Shelley, didn't you?" Please, please, Max. I'm begging you, don't do this. Think about what you're doing. I love you. We can be together forever. I promise I won't tell anyone what you did. I mean, what we have together, it's so important, it's so special. I wouldn't want to wreck it by going to the police. Your secret is safe with me, Max, I promise you. I love you. You mean the world to me. We can put this behind us, can't we?
Liar. I'm not a bloody idiot, Shelley. I wasn't born yesterday. I can see right through you. You made your position very clear, and I've made mine.
All of a sudden, Shelley found herself flung to the forest floor, and Max was on top of her. He leered down at her, and in the depths of a deep, almost menacious hatred, she could see burning in the green flames of his once beautiful eyes that had become cold and cruel.
Any last words, Shelley?
Please, Max, please, don't do this, I beg you, don't do this. But Max's thick fingers were around Shelley's neck before she could protest any further. He began to squeeze. and Shelley knew it was all over. She shut her eyes, praying her death would come quickly, and then she heard Max screaming. Wasn't she the one that was supposed to be screaming? Not the other way round. Max has released his grip from around her neck. What was going on? She opened her eyes, and that was when she saw her. She couldn't believe what she was seeing. A giant-sized female Bigfoot had picked up Max by the scruff of the neck and appeared to be dangling him like a puppet, and Max was shrieking, his eyes bulging from his sockets. "Help, Shelley! Do something, Shelley!" Shelley clutched her neck because it was still hurting from being squeezed so tightly. She sat up and stared at the Bigfoot through bemused eyes, not knowing what to make of the scene unfolding before her very eyes, which was insanely bizarre. The female Bigfoot was impressively tall, possibly about 9 foot, and was enormously big and very robust, with overlong arms and a pyramid-shaped head. She was covered in thick thatches of black hair, and was looking directly at Max, almost as if he was a cockroach. The female Bigfoot tossed him in the air a couple of times like a pancake, and then caught him just as he was about to hit the ground. She thrust his entire body against the tree, using it almost like an axe, and then in a second Max's scalp cracked wide open, and he lay on the forest floor, unmoving, and Shelley felt only heartfelt relief as she realized the man she thought she'd loved could hurt her no longer. The Bigfoot stood there silently, kicking the dead body in disgust, with a revulsed look on her face, and then her eyes met Shelley, and a telepathic exchange began between the two of them, a conversation that Shelley would never be likely to forget. "I saw him do this before," said the Bigfoot, "but not again. I couldn't let it happen again, even though my kind don't like to interfere with your kind. But I couldn't help myself. I saw it all, and had to do something. Last time I couldn't, but this time things were different. That man is not well. He wanted to kill you. His rage was all-consuming. I couldn't stand here and let that happen, especially since you were so much smaller than him, and didn't stand a chance. I was in the middle of a hunt, but your presence in the woods scared the raccoons I was chasing away. When I saw the man on top of you squeezing your neck, I knew there was no place for him here. He needed to be dealt with very firmly, and learn a tough lesson. I'm sorry you had to see me slinging his body in the way I did against the tree. But I couldn't resist. I was upset with what he did to you. It wasn't pretty. I wanted to scare him a little before I ended his suffering, for he needed to taste what fear feels like." "I'm fine now," said Shelley in her head, realizing that the female Bigfoot could read her mind, so dialogue wasn't necessary. "Thanks to you, I'll be fine. You saved my life. If it wasn't for you, I'd be dead. I'm so grateful to you. I don't know how to thank you. You say you saw him kill the other girl in the woods. Is that the girl who died 7 years ago? Is that what you saw?" "It was a while back," the Bigfoot admitted. "I saw him pulling a woman from under a thorn bush. She was begging him not to hurt her, and then he shot her in the head. I would have stopped him then and there if I could have, but I didn't because it was not meant to be." "What do you mean, not meant to be? I don't understand." "There's a time for everything. A time for a flower to burst forth on the meadow in a blaze of colour, and a time for that very same flower to die. Even before we were born, we chose the way we would exit from this planet, as did I. But luckily we don't remember all that, as none of us like to know the way we will die. Although we don't die, we just change form, from an earthly body into a spiritual one. I saw him kill her. She didn't have any more exit points left in her life, you see. She had planned to leave the earth plane very early. Before she was born, she planned this. So my intervention would have only postponed the inevitable. So I let things flow out naturally, as they were meant to. So this isn't my exit point? Is that what you're saying? Everyone is uniquely different. I can see in your energy you have 8 exit points. 8 times where you can choose to leave this earth plane. This was one of them. I was able to stop you leaving, because you still have 7 left. And I can see your soul still has much to accomplish on the earth plane. That's why I had to intervene and help you. You weren't ready to go. You were like the green fruit on a tree that falls off too early, and has a long way to go before it finally ripens. I thought he was a good person. How could I have got him so wrong? Because your kind cannot read other people's minds and thoughts. You cannot see energy fields, nor can you see into the ethereal realms like I can. I couldn't imagine such limitations myself. So you could tell that he was a bad man, could you? Asked Shelley, looking at the Bigfoot curiously. I wouldn't say he's intentionally bad, but he's governed by a powerful red aura that dictates his emotions and overrides his common sense. The red aura can be extremely tumultuous at the best of times. Believe me, I know all about it from learned experience. This man can seem so amenable, so nice, but when he's angry he loses all control and erupts like the mountain over there, she said, pointing towards Mount Rainier. When that happens, he's volatile, explosive and dangerous, and for that reason he needed to be dealt with. It sometimes happens with my own kind too. And when one of them becomes a liability, sometimes we have no other choice but to take him or her out, for violence puts us all in mortal danger. I know of one family that had 3 red auras, all 3 of them boys. The father killed them at birth. He knew they imposed a great threat. He was very sad to have to do that, but sometimes you do what you have to do for the greater good. The Bigfoot helped Shelley to her feet, but she discovered to her horror there was no energy left inside her, so she slumped on the floor. You're in shock, said the Bigfoot. I tell you what, I'll carry you back to your camp. And with that she threw Shelley over her powerful shoulders and glided back to the lake's edge, where Max had pitched their tent. The trills of the crickets filled the night, and the sky above her head glistened down on her, bejewelled with so many bedazzling stars. And Shelley was suddenly struck with a profound realization that she was exceedingly lucky to be alive. The Bigfoot informed Shelley that she would get rid of Max's body, and she gave Shelley his car keys. She then carried Shelley to her tent and dropped her off. Shelley crashed into her sleeping bag and fell into a deep, contented sleep that night. She was too exhausted to deal with the night's affairs. In the morning she woke up and called her brother Morris, who was at the campground in less than 15 minutes. She informed him about everything that had transpired, and together they carefully told the police that Shelley had woken up in her tent in the middle of the night to find her boyfriend all but missing. He got up in the middle of the night to answer a call of nature, she said. He never returned. She didn't want to tell the police that a large female Bigfoot had killed her boyfriend, for she was sure her story would not be believed, and end up making her look as if she had something bad to hide. The police took Shelley in for questioning, and seemed completely satisfied that she had nothing to do with her fiancé's disappearance. They informed her that this was not the first time someone had gone missing in that campground, as a woman had disappeared 7 years earlier.
Some places, ma'am, are notorious for people going missing, I'm afraid. Almost as if something outer-worldly is going on.
The police searched the campground and found no sign of Max McKeith. So Shelley knew the Bigfoot had made good of her promises and lightly buried Max in a place where he would never ever be found. Max had a memorial service because he was assumed dead. His mother told her that he'd always been a difficult child, predisposed to temper tantrums that would make him become unhinged and volatile. He was always beating up boys at the school playground, you know, getting into all kinds of scrapes. I could never control him. There were times, I hasten to say, I was terrified of my own son. I know it's bad to speak ill of the dead, but I have to tell you, young lady, you had a lucky escape, so don't mourn him too much. I told my husband, whoever married my son, well, you've got to feel sorry for them. Shelley couldn't believe that Max's own mother spoke of her son in this way, but according to Max's sister Julia, Max really had been impossible to love because of his volatile, explosive temper. Shelley sent an anonymous letter to the police, informing them that she had heard the body of Barbara Roxburgh could be found in the lake, at the Lakefield camping ground. I think you need to search the lake better. I believe the body is definitely there. One day a newspaper article got Shelley's undivided attention. It read, "The body of missing woman Barbara Roxburgh that went missing 7 years ago, was found at the Lakefield camping ground in Mount Rainier, after an anonymous tip-off from the police. The family of Barbara Roxburgh can now finally put their daughter to rest. Autopsy results confirm that the young woman suffered from a gunshot injury to her head. As to who killed Barbara Roxburgh, the investigation remains ongoing. When Shelley read the report, she sighed with relief, glad that closure had been given to the Roxburgh family. As to the whereabouts of Max McKeith, the investigation was now closed, but he was registered as a missing man, assumed dead. These days Shelley is now happily married with 2 children of her own, and still lives in Seattle, but she never forgot the Bigfoot that saved her life that day. So there you are. That's my story. Wow, what an incredible story. Until next time, goodbye and good night.